Get started. My name is Joe Swimmer. I'm the Executive Director of Episcopal Parish Network. I'm so pleased to welcome you today to this session on stewarding our assets. In particular, one of our most important assets, our buildings. And we have a terrific panel that's lined up to share with you today. We would ask that if you can, please put where you're dialing in from, your name and your parish into the chat, just so they get a sense of where everybody is watching from. And please use the chat feature for your questions or comments. Do post questions and comments, and our panel will get to them as they are able. We have several more digital workshops upcoming, and welcome you to go to our website at episcopalparishes.org to take a look at that. And thank you again so much for joining us, and thanks to our panel. I'm now going to hand it off to our friend Bill Kessler to moderate the session. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you, Joe. On behalf of Episcopal Parish Network and the panelists, I want to thank you for attending. It's always rewarding when you're putting on a webinar to have attendees and people who are really interested in the topic. And it sounds as though we have quite a number today. So that's very gratifying to us. Thank you. I'll first introduce myself and then go around the room. And I don't want to go past this point without thanking them publicly for taking the time to plan and to think through how we can make this most informative and rewarding for you. My name is Bill Kessler. I'm CEO of Building Solutions. We are a 35-year-old firm that advises churches and schools on matters concerning their facilities, their physical plant, and its operations. We have among our clients quite a number of Episcopal churches and schools, probably more than any other denomination, which is rooted in our history as a company. As a worshiping Episcopalian myself, full disclosure, our very first project was with the school that is the partner of one of our panelists, Tom Hotchkiss, who will introduce himself later. So very excited to be here, and thank EPN for its interest in facilities and highlighting this as an aspect of ministry that is in sore need of attention, frankly, in many institutions, and not the least of which are our churches. So I'll pass it next to Joe, and you can pass it on from there, Joe.
Yeah. My name is Joe Sinelli. I'm the parish administrator at the Church of Bethesda by the Sea in Palm Beach, Florida. I've been here as parish administrator almost 2 years, but spent the last 30 years as a Christian school administrator, working with churches and schools, always overseeing facilities and facility staff. Bethesda by the Sea is just about 100-year-old building campus. We consist of our church location. We have our rectory. We own another home across the street from the church. And then we own a resale building, the Church Mouse, which is a mile or two from the church. So I oversee the facilities for all those locations as well.
Tom, would you like to go next?
Sure. Thanks so much, Bill. I appreciate the opportunity to be on. Am I on screen, Bill?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm at Good Shepherd Episcopal Church and School in Dallas, Texas. I've been there since 2014 as the vicar, and have over time fallen into dealing with facilities. They don't teach a class in seminary on this, dealing with buildings and stewarding the assets, and yet you learn from the moment you get it on the grounds of a church that's part of the ministry. Our physical plant at Good Shepherd is a church and our buildings, and also a school and their buildings, And we are two operations, one church, one entity. So I work with our vestry and a committee of folks on the church side on operations and on long-term maintenance of the facilities. Over to Rob.
Thank you, Tom. I'm Rob Lamborn, rector of St. Mark and St. Paul in Sewanee, formerly Odie Memorial Parish. This is a pastoral-sized congregation, around 100 Sunday attendance, and we have 3 buildings on our campus, which is a few acres. There's the church, built in the early 1890s and restored in 2004. The rectory, which built in the early 1900s and never fully restored, but it's had different levels of work on it. It no longer functions as a rectory. And then the parish hall, part of it was built in the early 1900s and got renovated in 2014, and then a large hall added on in 2014. We work with a volunteer buildings and grounds committee that serves under the chairship of the Junior Warden. It meets quarterly. We also have some volunteers who say, I won't come to a meeting, but I'll fix something for you. And so that's another important resource. And our parish administrator, who came a few months ago, has a background in property maintenance as well, and that's been very helpful to us.
Tom, can you follow on Father Rob's brief description of their governing committee and how that committee interfaces with staff? Could you tell us a little bit about the support that you get from your parish staff and lay volunteer?
Sure.
A little bit about what they do, how you challenge them, and so on.
Sure, thanks. And I'll add on. We're a program-sized parish in Dallas, 1,000 members, about 300 in church, and at a church building that was built in 1964. And we did the first capital campaign renovation at other buildings built in 1987, Parish Hall and offices in Christian Ed, and did our first real capital campaign in 2017 after I got there. I work with the vestry and with the Junior Warden. The Junior Warden's over Building and Grounds Committee, and like Rob, our Building and Grounds Committee meets quarterly, and they do a lot of work with planning and looking ahead. When I first arrived, it was 3 wise men, or 3 old men, or 3 people who had retired and had a lot of time to look after things and did a lot of stuff. It's grown into more of a resource, and of us trying to find people with expertise to help us look ahead and plan. And then we work on using volunteers every so often to work on project-based things. But it's a volunteer committee headed. I see day-to-day operations, and the Junior Warden and I work on long-term projects with the Building and Grounds Committee.
And how many members did you say there are?
Now on the committee we have six. It was 5 or 6 members on the committee active, and then there are always that's a good point, Rob. There are always a few people who don't want to serve on a committee but have some great talents and gifts, and they're ancillary, they're adjunct, but they're not on the committee. We have a few people who are willing to do, but really 5 or 6 people, 6 people on our committee right now, and some people with real expertise, from commercial building to and commercial to civil engineering, to those kind of things that are really helpful.
And HVAC?
Yeah, HVAC, that's right, HVAC, commercial.
And let me ask you one more question about that, and then like to pass to Joe for him to talk about their organization. And this would be for any of you, but are you intentional about extending invitations to this committee based on expertise or whatever might be the criteria? Or are these committees that just sort of come together with people who are birds of the same feather?
I'll say one thing and pass on. For us, it's a standing committee of the vestry. So to me, it ends up that you're looking for, there may be some representation from the vestry, but you already have that from the junior warden. So we're looking for expertise to help steward the needs of the church. So we are just like you would look for someone who can teach godly play to children who, we're looking for someone who's got expertise to help with this.
Joe?
Well, we have very much the same. Our junior warden oversees our Buildings and Grounds Committee. Our Buildings and Grounds Committee meets monthly. When I arrived here, we had some great dysfunction as far as how the committee and sextons operated together and so forth. So we've actually spent a good deal of time recently in clearly defining roles and responsibilities from how Buildings and Grounds operates, how the sextons operate, how the reporting works, because as tends to happen in facilities is that you get a lot of people crossing over and whose responsibility is what. And so this was very helpful to us to kind of define day-to-day operations, responsibilities for that, reporting, and then the Buildings and Grounds having more of a big picture view and trying to be a little bit more strategic rather than them being a committee that was more dialed into the weeds and the daily operations of the campus and buildings. And so that's been a part of ours. So we have our Buildings and Grounds Committee, which is about 10 people on it, which meets monthly. And then we have a lead sexton who oversees the sexton team. The sextons report to the parish administrator, and I communicate with the junior warden and the committee, who in turn then communicates with the vestry as far as building needs and things of that nature.
One of the things that you've done that's very impressive is to define those roles in a document. Would this be a good time for us to put that on the screen so those who are interested would know what they could access on the platform? Sure. I'm going to ask my associate to put that up there if we can screen share. If you want to walk through any of this,
sure,
feel free.
This was what I was referring to, that we try to clearly define roles and responsibilities, understanding where lines were drawn as far as reporting as well. And so we wanted to lay out the vestry, basically their primary role in the care and maintenance of the parish properties and their oversight of that. And then they select the junior warden with the help of the committee, and the junior warden has the responsibility of a big picture oversight, but being clear that the junior warden and the Buildings and Grounds Committee is not responsible for day-to-day projects, repairs, maintenance. So they're not to be in the weeds in that way. And then the lead sexton is responsible for the day-to-day operations, maintenance, and repairs. And the lead sexton doesn't report to the Buildings and Grounds Committee, but rather reports to the parish administrator for immediate direction and responsibility. And then it's my responsibility as parish administrator to communicate on a regular basis. I meet weekly with my lead sexton and the sexton team. And then we have the Buildings and Grounds chair join our meeting a few times a month, but then we prep for the Buildings and Grounds Committee meeting once a month. and then that meeting is held, and then I assist with the prepping of the report for the monthly vestry meeting. And then obviously whatever is necessary as far as we have policies as far as budgetary responsibilities, certain thresholds of repairs that then get passed on to reports for the finance committee and or vestry based on the level of response. But this helps because it also defines when a committee member is a committee member. And everybody probably has the same thing of sometimes it's hard when when are they committee member and when are they just a parishioner? And so understanding that the committee, including the junior warden, doesn't have in our setting doesn't have authority as the committee unless they're actually meeting as the committee or they've been given a set circumstance or a set project in which to work on. But that helps quite a bit rather than having what in essence would be multiple dozens of sextons operating within the parish that are all trying to answer facility questions and telling people how things need to be done. So this has proven very helpful for us.
Great. Before we shift gears, Rob, I wanted to come back to you. I hear, at least from the last two speakers, they're delineating that the committee structure is helpful to them by defining their work as not being in the weeds, but differentiating what the committee is doing from what staff may be doing. I think you're the smallest of the three parishes. My observation, I guess I'll try to reveal my bias in the instead of talking around it. It has appeared to me in various size parishes that we're working in that this is really more of a dilemma for a smaller parish that is wanting for resources and wanting for help. Sure, executive strategic committees are important and they have a place, but we also kind of like to have them in the weeds when we need them. Can you speak to that from the standpoint of a smaller parish? How do you, I guess, control that or make that most useful to the church?
Given the size of our community, which is about 2,500 permanent residents, we interact with each other a lot in daily life outside of church, and so there's kind of a baseline of relationship that helps things work well, but less formally. There are certainly some weeds around here that wouldn't get pulled unless we did the pulling, including the committee, and so it is a hands-on committee. I would say it does more maintenance kind of things than it does strategic kind of things. But when we need to do strategic kind of things, like considering a firm to do a comprehensive facilities assessment, they are very involved and they put on those hats and do that work.
We have questions coming in. I would like to, and these are great questions and they relate to this, but if we could, we're about 20 minutes into the hour now, I think. It might be a good time for us to speak a little bit more about what these committees and these organizational structures are doing right now. What are the toughest questions that you're wrestling with right now? Some examples of whether you're all strategic or struggling to be strategic or don't particularly want to be strategic only. Maybe share with us what your challenges and your rewards have been. And I guess we might, Tom, would you like to start that, or any of you who have something? Yeah.
Sure. I've got an idea here, and it does kind of cross cross size and boundary here. I've been at several different size churches. I was rector of a church in Nashville, Tennessee, that was about 150 people in church, and we had a similar problem to what we're dealing with right now in Dallas. And our committee has been working and not procrastinating, but working for 2 or 3 years on what you do about an air handler that was put in 1964, 1965 in a church. And it is one of your largest pieces of equipment. And now it is one of the most expensive pieces of equipment to replace. And how you plan to replace it, how you can work on replacing it, and also getting not making a decision so quickly that you're able to get some expert advice. And this is part of what we've done, is to use some outside sources to help us look at what are some options, from totally replacing it to rebuilding it in place at 75% of the cost, which is going to still give us an air handler that's going to be great for that building for a long period of time. But that's something that our building and grounds committee, and these are not people who they're knowledgeable, but we need to reach out to people who really know this space. And we're not talking about we pay 18 consultants. We're working with one group who's able to help us reach out to a couple consultants. And I was thinking back to my days in Nashville when we had one unit for our entire plant, this huge thing, and we knew it'd been there 35 years and it was about to break, and we needed to have a plan to know what would happen the day it would break. And so we had to come up with and get some advice ahead of time. And that's kind of part of what I think is at work for most of us, is pre-planning allows us to get some things done on time. And ignoring puts us behind the 8 ball. So.
I mean, I think I would add that I think the most, probably the kind of the bad word, if you would, in facilities is deferred maintenance. I mean, that is the absolute bane of existence for all facility teams. And then, so you get stuck between deferred maintenance and the duct tape and chewing gum philosophy. And I think every church in ministry suffers with the same dilemma, and that is there's always more work that needs to be done than dollars that are in the budget, and you're caught between trying to figure out what do you spend to just keep things running versus replacing them and repairing them in such a way that it's a more permanent fix. And I think that's really that. I mean, I know for us, that's our big challenge right now, is that we have spent so many years and just kicking a can down the road on a lot of these things, and putting them together in such a way that it was a minimal impact to the budget. And now we're saying, do we continue that philosophy, or do we actually look to make replacements and repairs that are going to be long-term, but of course are going to be a whole lot more costly? So that whole idea of the deferred maintenance monster, dealing with that, and then dealing with that strategicness versus just survival mode.
Are there, go ahead.
If you had something for Joe, go ahead.
No, I'll ask a follow-on to his in a moment.
Okay.
Thanks.
Well, 2 things I would add to what they've said is, one issue is getting objectivity into our decision-making process. We had a contractor up on the roof of the parish hall a year ago, let's say, He said, "Oh, look at all these granules that have come off of your shingles. You need to replace that roof very soon." And here's my bid. And then we said, "Okay, well, we'll get another bid." The second bidder came in and said, "That roof's okay. You're doing fine. Call me in 5 years." Um, and I'm curious. I would be curious to know how full the schedules of those two roofers were compared to each other, in giving us that information. Another issue for us has been finding specially qualified contractors to do repairs and maintenance. We have a beautiful wood shake roof on the historic church. Finding roofers qualified to repair historic wood shake roofs in rural Middle Tennessee, it's very difficult. We have a panel right now on our copper-clad steeple that has come loose and is swinging in the wind. And, we can't there aren't a bunch of contractors nearby qualified to do that repair work. So that's been a difficulty for us given our location.
That's where I was going to go with you. The resource question that is one of the burning ones there. Is there, have you been able to, and Joe, I'll get back to you in a second, but Rob, just as a follow on, if resources is the burning question, are there ways that you've been able to enlist your committee or those who are helping you to address that, or is this just unsolvable?
We're treating it like it's solvable. One thing I'll say is our parish administrator has developed a database, just in Excel, but that has information about different systems like HVACs mainly, because we've got a ton of little HVACs around, that links them to by serial number, model, and their repair history. Because what happens the day one of them goes out is you call the HVAC contractor, they come and fix it, and they say fix the HVAC, or they might put some number on it, but we have to keep a track of the service history of each unit. The other thing that we have done and are in the process of doing again is having a comprehensive facilities audit. Several years ago, we had one by piggybacking on a large institution nearby that was having a company come in. That experience, we got a lot of sort of boilerplate information, hundreds of pages of it, and found it not to be that helpful. We're paying a lot more money this time. We're getting less reporting, but more reporting tailored to our specific situation. And it's our hope that this report will form the basis of a campaign to provide for our future as a church.
We'll get back to that campaign, because I think that's something that we all ultimately, that's a step that we all need to take. But before we get too far away from Joe's comments before about deferred maintenance and that boogie, what have you found is the most useful tool, technique, consciousness raising practice, whatever it is you're doing to bring focus on that? How would you advise parishes that may be listening to this webinar who know that they have it, but they haven't it hasn't made the headlines yet in the church?
Well, I will say one of the first things that I did in trying to solve this issue is I started with all of our vendors. So there's also a difficulty that comes in between, you want to have a relationship with a vendor who knows you and who, like was said, if it can fix your specific issues. But then there also tends to be where you've had this vendor for so many years, they've been your HVAC contractor for the last 20 years, and they're just kind of, they're always the one, and somehow the AC never seems to be fully working. It's always in need of being repaired. And so we started with that process of just kind of, and our process was to get multiple bids so we could see what people were saying as they evaluated our systems. And we found some very interesting things, such as we were paying a considerable amount of money monthly for a maintenance contract on HVAC, and we have had some major repairs and so we said, how did the company that we were paying monthly not see this? But it was one of those type of things. And then just trying to make from the vestry to the committee to our parish, just making everybody understand that they're really, I mean, the preservation of the building is paramount. And it's everybody assumes that everything, lights just stay on and the doors are open and everything works, and they don't think much about it. But I know you said we're gonna get to this in a minute, but we are also in the process, after doing an extensive campus evaluation, of setting the stage for our capital campaign. And one of the primary pieces right in the center of it is building preservation and what it takes to actually keep this campus running, but more than that, to keep it so that it's around for the next 100 years.
Do you want to just continue and tell us about the transition to the campaign, or
Sure.
we can go back to the other?
Sure. So we, after doing the campus evaluation and review, that provided us valuable information to be able to say, looking at our systems and everything across the campus, where the greatest needs are, because we guessed at a lot of that. And now we're able to say, yes, we realize this is, for instance, everybody talks about air conditioning. Now, of course, we're in Florida, so everybody is panicked about, we have to replace air conditioning units and we got a budget for them every year. But in the nearly 2 years I've been here, nobody's ever said roof. And we did the campus evaluation and found out that one of our roofs is in very bad shape and is a critical need. So it is helping us to shape our capital improvement plan and to set up our strategic plan for capital expenses, and mapping those out between what is going to be critical needs in this next budget, to mapping it out over the next 5 years or more. But then being able to have that information that we can share with the parish and beyond in this capital campaign, to say these are major facility items that need to be addressed. And now we have some real valuable, intelligent information to put in front of anybody who wants to know, why do we think that these repairs need to be made?
Tom, do you want to talk about financing and funding, what you know about that, besides the big air handler?
Pardon?
I said, in addition to the big air handler that we heard about, do you want to talk a bit about your strategies and how you use your committee, but how the parish is approaching dealing with deferred maintenance and future capital needs?
Yeah, well, I do, and I also want to kind of be sensitive to a couple of questions I'm seeing in the chat, which are very challenging, from a small size resource to a massive amount of need. And the first thing I want to say when we're preparing and trying to plan is, you're not alone. You're not alone. Thank you, whoever shared the resource there in the chat, for if you're in a National Historic Register area, there are grants, and there are grants. Also, for some of our facilities, we're in this together. You're part of a diocese, and you know, if your diocese has put you out there to say you're on there to fend for yourself, eventually keep knocking on that door. Go back and explain to them that you all are partners in this. But in the financing piece, I do feel that when you build a budget, and this goes back to Joe's bugaboo of deferred maintenance, is that the dollars in your budget do reflect values. And it is often, we have more needs than we usually have dollars. But somewhere in there, we need to, even if it is incrementally, include the budget for our facility, if the facility is part of maintaining and putting forward the mission of the church. If it's not, then we can just let the building go and go do it somewhere else. But for most of us, we don't have the luxury of letting that resource just go away. We need to find some way of putting, even if it's incrementally, even if it's for a very small parish, putting aside $1,000 or $250 a month to make sure that we're saying we're doing something. But for a large parish, we're, you know, incrementally doing that and saying that we're preparing so that we are able to, when we go around, and whether we do a formal assessment or whether we do an informal assessment of our needs, at least we can begin to deal with them. That's what I'm thinking there, Bill.
Good, thank you. And it is time for us to tie back to some of these questions. And Rob will, I think some of these will tie into you sharing your experience thus far with fundraising. There is a theme here, and we have one congregation that has 24 in attendance, elderly members. Church was built in 1855. I mean, we can all picture that, right? What kinds of resources would a church like that be able to tie to? Tom, you mentioned available grants, things that are particularly if it's an historical structure that is of community interest. Rob, you're in a small community, a very Episcopal community in Sewanee, Tennessee, but so there would naturally be interest. But can you offer encouragement or advice or thoughts about that situation?
Every community is so different. We try to be a center for community beyond the parish. So there are lots of different types of organizations who meet here. There is a preschool, a secular preschool that we provide space for. We try to make there be different reasons for a variety of people to come on the property over and above church members. I don't know that a ton of that there's a ton of revenue from that, but I think people want to be a part of a church that's part of the community, I guess is my initial thought on that.
I'm not sure how large the community is where this question came from, but a comment that is in the chat that did resonate with me is that in some communities, I'm not sure that this would be the case in Sewanee, but I know it's the case in Dallas and also, Joe, most likely in your town. Often the parish administrators have some sort of a consortium that, or at least they get together for lunch regularly, so that there are opportunities for idea sharing. And while they may all be serving the same community and be all attracting parishioners or congregations, there often out of those, there are opportunities to identify responsive vendors, the ones that really do get the HVAC fixed and are interested and willing to to work for perhaps smaller institutions, or they're just mission-driven companies themselves who would be able and willing to do the extra work that sometimes is involved in working for a church community.
Hey, Bill?
Yeah.
I think on your same point there, when you're in a smaller situation, maybe it's just the rector, the senior warden, junior warden. You have if there is no consortium, I'd call the parish or two I know in the next nearby that might have a resource like that or know something to vet out someone who could come and do electrical work for me at the church before the seminary does not teach you how to figure out who is the right electrician when you go through when you Google it or went through the yellow pages when I got out of seminary. So anyway, we're not alone and we can help each other. So there really are some great ways, and I appreciate that. That consortium piece is great, but also just leaning on people around you and asking of them who already have the resources and have vetted the vendors is a great suggestion. Thank you, Phil.
Anybody want to add to the funding discussion? That seems to be one thing that's of interest here.
Well,
funding, financing.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, I think what was mentioned already, I think Tom mentioned that just in the budgeting process, you demonstrate your commitment to keeping your facilities at a certain level based on the budget that you have. I mean, in our case, somebody asked one of the questions about the sextons. We do have paid sextons, so they are paid on staff, and then our Buildings and Grounds Committee is all volunteer. But I do think that it is important that that's demonstrated in the budgeting process, and we also do that in our materials to demonstrate the percentage of the budget that's goes toward facility maintenance and budgeting, so people understand it from two perspectives. One, just to understand what it takes to keep the building maintained, but then also to realize that if we were to seek other funds of other ways of revenue to help pay for that, how much more money there is for ministry if it wasn't just trying to keep the building up to date. Now, in our case, our building is, somebody had asked in the beginning whether our buildings are part of our advertisements, and is it important for us to keep our buildings in those shape. We are a destination location where we are, so it is important for us to have our buildings at a certain level, because we do have people visiting from all over the world every week. So that makes it an added pressure, because you need to not just keep it so that it's functioning on Sundays, but that it's at a peak level every day of the week, because it's constant. The campus is constantly in use and constantly within view.
I think Rob and I first met when he attended an EPN webinar on the subject of raising funds for facilities preservation and extending the life of facilities. And one of the messages that came out of that, it was a case study of a church, another church in Dallas that it happens to be where I worship, that launched a capital campaign that was really originated with some seed money from a family that wished to build a chapel, that a chapel that frankly would have been added to a facility that was already suffering cost, stress, and strain just for operations. In some ways, while many wanted and all felt some level of need for a chapel, what we didn't need was more space to maintain. So fortunately, the very generous family was flexible enough to allow it to be to launch a capital campaign that was totally overtly and openly aimed at developing a fund that would be placed in the endowment of the church. Not all churches have endowments, I recognize, but bear with me here for a second. That would serve as a sort of a savings account that would be matched up with this forecast of future capital needs. But I think the thing that got many people's attention, and I'd like Rob to comment on in his situation, is that that can be having that information about what the existing building needs can be part and parcel of also addressing needs that parishioners are feeling for either more space or a radical improvement of a particular space. It could be made part of a traditional capital campaign if you have the information to incorporate it into the capital campaign. It doesn't have to be just one or the other, a maintenance fund or a new facilities fund that you're raising, but it can be serve both purposes. Do any of you, and I come back to you, Rob, because I sort of cut you off on the capital campaign step, or any of the rest of you have anything to add to that thought?
I see it as a constant renewal kind of thing, that, and God is making all things new, and that's an ongoing process, and so we connect with that in the even with old facilities, continuing to make them fresh and usable. We are in the process of working with a campaign consultant, and when we have the final document from our facilities assessor, we will be basing a campaign proposal to the vestry on what the different needs are for the building for the next 10 to 15 years. So we deliberately put the two things together. We don't need new space right now, but we do know that what we have is showing its age, and to be responsible now, we will spend more money on ministry and less on crisis management by planning this out, as opposed to just letting the crises happen and respond to them.
And what many parishes learn is that in the long run, the cost of occupying the space, the life cycle cost of the facility will be much lower if those things are addressed, nipped in the bud, than if they're allowed to run to failure. I think more and more parishes are becoming wise to that, although it's painful and sometimes not possible to do it to the degree that you would like. But how is that, I guess, tying this back to our goal today, are there ways that we can use our committees and decision-making structure to kind of evangelize that idea?
I mean, I would say the concept of being good stewards and making it very aware of maximizing every dollar, because every dollar matters, and every dollar spent on the building, fixing an AC is a dollar that's not going into some other ministry or into outreach or something that, and so I think that one piece of advice that I would give that I found very helpful is when you find a particular vendor who not only can service your property, whether it's an electrician or a plumber, whatever it may be, but understands your ministry, understands your mission, and connects with that, then being able to use that particular vendor, and where I have asked them, who else would you recommend? Is there, to say to a plumber, is there an electrician that we could go to that might share the same kind of vision for what we're doing here and appreciate what we're doing, and using them to help us find the best vendors that are going to give us the best prices, because they realize that every dollar is so precious to us because we're trying to be such good stewards, and that helps tremendously in also finding people who will donate part of a repair or not charge us for something because they understand that greater mission than just simply another building that they're coming to work on, and that helps overall in the budgeting when you can stretch every dollar a little bit more like that.
Hey, Bill?
We have about 5 to 10 minutes left. Tom, were you about to speak to that?
I was going to say real quickly about the you said about the committee piece there. First of all, shout out to St. Dunstan's, Bethesda, Maryland. I see several folks off from there. I grew up a mile from you, and I went by your church every day on my way to school. So it is a small church. We just use mirrors. Anyway, I see so many. I mean, my heart goes out to the depth of the complexity of some of these problems that we are all struggling with, from old buildings, from need beyond it's unfathomable. And part of me wants to say that together, it's the people of the church who get together and have to work together with God to figure out what to do with what is given to us. And I can't figure out for some the massive problems. It seems that I'm going to pray for some of y'all tonight as I hear your situations. But I do know that these outposts, it took a lot to get them there, and mostly I don't think we really want to give them up, because they're very hard to reestablish. Literally the physical outposts in some of the places that we are. But it's the people, the committee, the groups we bring together who figure out what is the most important way that we can steward these resources, and how can we do this. And it may take years and years and years, or it may take something completely out of the box different than we ever thought we would do. But God's given us the resources, and it's really back to us.
Tom, thank you very much for that. And I think one of the themes that I'm seeing in the offerings in the chat and what I'm hearing from this group is that we're a part of larger communities, and those communities are made up. There's one suggestion in the chat of how they tie in, for example, to it's apparently in an area that where labor unions are strong in the construction trades, but it could be trade unions, it could be professional facilities groups, it could be real estate professionals who are in part of volunteer organizations that perhaps many of the members attend church, but it's probably they're probably quite diverse in that regard, that have that are assembled because they have a mission of supporting their communities, including their churches. So sort of finding those people with the heart and the sense of mission whether they are practicing professionals or vendors or just volunteers, may be part of the recipe, short of having formal capital campaigns and fundraising efforts. But I'm also hearing a theme that before you can do any of that, you need to know what needs to be done, and get out of the overwhelmed state and into a state where you can be orderly and not only know what has to be done, but what should be done first, because you're not going to get to the last. and hopefully in a reasonable manner address these considerable facility problems that everyone has and shares. We are right at the end of our hour, and I think I'll look really quickly on the chat. I think I would just like to close here by inviting anyone who still has questions or their question wasn't answered adequately here to contact EPN or look on their webinar platform, where I think Joe Swimmer will be posting information. I'm going to also put my contact information in the chat. I would invite the other panelists, if they wish, to do that, so we'll be able to we'll be available for follow-up. We very much appreciate having all of you here who are listening to the webinar. And I again want to thank Joe, Tom, and Rob for dedicating the time to this to share your experiences. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much too.
Thank you.
Thank you.